What if one child's words could shatter the authority of an entire courtroom? In a room full of expectations and biases, a young orphan steps forward, about to speak the truth that will make everyone stop in their tracks. The truth isn't just his. It's the story of countless children who have been failed by the system. The courtroom is filled with murmurs and the rustling of papers. Lawyers sit at their tables, whispering about strategies, while spectators quietly observe, waiting for the trial to proceed. In the middle of it all stands Marcus, a 13-year-old black boy, wearing hand-me-down clothes that don't fit quite right. His hands tremble slightly as he stands before the judge, the weight of the moment sinking in. He's a young child who has already faced so much, too much, perhaps, and now he's being judged for something he didn't do. The judge, a woman in her mid-40s, pregnant and sitting high up on her platform, looks down at him with a piercing gaze. Her eyes seem to carry the weight of the system, a system that has already decided who Marcus is based on the fact that he's been shuffled through the foster care system and labeled as a problem child. But she doesn't know the whole story. She doesn't know what he's been through. She doesn't know the reasons behind the accusation. Marcus stands there, shifting uncomfortably, his heart pounding in his chest. His lawyer is speaking quietly to him, trying to prepare him for what comes next. But Marcus is too distracted to listen. He's heard it all before, the whispering voices telling him that people like him don't stand a chance. Marcus! His lawyer's voice brings him back to the present. The room seems to grow quieter as the judge looks at him, signaling that it's his turn to speak. He's been through this before. He's stood in front of judges before, being told what to do, being told how he's supposed to act, but it's never felt like this. This time, something's different. Maybe it's the weight of the moment, or maybe it's the fact that this time it's his turn to speak. He clears his throat, the sound too loud in the quiet room. He looks up, glancing at the judge and then at the prosecutor. The words don't come easy, but Marcus knows this is the moment. He knows he has to speak up, not just for himself, but for every kid who's been written off, ignored, and left behind. "I didn't do it," Marcus says, his voice steady but quiet. The room goes still, and even the judge's gaze softens slightly. Marcus feels the weight of every eye on him. He knows they don't believe him. He's used to that. "But you don't know me," Marcus continues, his voice gaining strength. "You don't know what it's like to be a kid, bouncing from one foster home to the next, just trying to find a place to belong. You don't know what it's like to have people tell you that you're nothing but a statistic, that you're just another kid who won't make it." He pauses for a moment, looking at the judge and then at the jury. "But I'm here," he says. "I'm still here, and I'm not giving up." His words hang in the air, a quiet defiance against all the assumptions made about him and about kids like him. The judge leans forward slightly, her hand resting on her chin. For the first time, it seems like she's listening, really listening. "Why are you here, Marcus?" the judge asks, her voice softer now, curious. Marcus takes a deep breath, the tension easing from his shoulders. This is his moment, and he knows it. "I'm here because the system failed me. But I'm not a criminal. I'm just a kid who's trying to make it. And I deserve a chance." The silence in the courtroom is deafening. Everyone is looking at him now, and Marcus can feel their eyes. But this time, it doesn't feel like judgment. It feels like they're finally seeing him, finally hearing him. He takes one last look at the judge, his voice steady as he speaks one final time. "I'm not what you think I am," Marcus says, "but I'm more than what the system says I am." Marcus has spent his life in and out of foster care after losing both of his parents in a tragic accident. At just 6 years old, he was taken from the wreckage of his home, where memories of laughter and love were replaced by the cold, impersonal walls of various foster homes. With each transition, he learned to fend for himself, quietly enduring the sting of abandonment, often finding solace in books or the occasional mentor who didn't see him as a lost cause. But Marcus wasn't given much of a chance. He was labeled a troublemaker, a problem child, the kind of kid who was expected to fail, expected to disappoint. Foster homes, overcrowded and often under-resourced, were no place to thrive. He was given little room to grow emotionally or intellectually. Even when he succeeded in school or showed a spark of brilliance, it was often dismissed. Teachers chalked up his behavior as rebellious, and counselors saw him as a ticking time bomb, one bad decision away from ruining his life. None of them bothered to see the person Marcus truly was, a resilient, intelligent young boy just looking for a shot at a better life. A life where he could be respected for who he was, not just what people assumed about him. Throughout all of this, Marcus was not just fighting against the system of foster care. He was fighting against the weight of systemic racism, a force that colored every interaction he had. He was seen as a threat before he could even speak, perceived as a problem before he could even ask for help. The color of his skin made him invisible in one room and a target in the next. He was used to being judged based on assumptions, people looking at his name or his history before giving him a chance. Marcus had come to understand early on that he would have to fight twice as hard just to be seen as human. In the courtroom, where the world seemed to pass judgment on his every word and move, Marcus wasn't just fighting for his freedom. He was fighting for his very humanity. He stood there, looking at a judge who, like many others, had already formed an opinion about him. She, like so many before her, looked at him through the lens of his past rather than his potential. Judge Taylor had seen it all, the juvenile delinquents, the ones who never seemed to make it. She had ruled on countless cases, handed down sentences, and sent children into the system. It had been a steady, predictable job until Marcus. She had seen enough young black boys like him to feel confident in her approach, tough on them, for they were always troublesome in her eyes. However, the truth was more complicated. Judge Taylor had a child of her own now, a little girl who would soon be coming of age in this very world that she had shaped. She watched her own child play, unaware of the biases that seeped into every corner of their society, and it made her question everything. The cases she had presided over now seemed more like echoes of failure, not just for the children she sentenced, but for herself. Her own eyes were opening, and it was only a matter of time before she could no longer ignore the weight of her past decisions. As a mother, she was beginning to understand that the justice system, one she had trusted and upheld, was deeply flawed, especially when it came to young people like Marcus. She couldn't help but wonder if she had contributed to the destruction of so many futures that were just as worthy as her own child's. She had never been forced to confront her own biases, but now, as she looked at Marcus, his youth and pain reflected in her own role in perpetuating that same injustice, she knew this was the moment to face the truth. For the first time, Judge Taylor's personal life was colliding with her professional one. Would she continue to hand down the same harsh decisions, treating children like Marcus as a lost cause? Or would she begin to confront the systemic failures that had shaped her own career? Would she be part of the problem, or could she find a way to fix it before it was too late? The courtroom is thick with tension, the air heavy as Marcus stands alone, facing a room filled with people who have already decided his fate. The accusations against him are based on the actions of his foster brother, someone he's had little to no control over. But because of Marcus's background, his past in foster care, his skin color, and his neighborhood, everyone assumes he's guilty. The judge, the jury, and the gallery look at him with suspicion, their minds already made up. Judge Taylor, sitting high above the proceedings, listens to the arguments without showing any emotion. She's heard cases like this countless times before, and in her mind, this one is no different. As the prosecutor outlines the case against Marcus, she prepares to deliver a ruling based on her own assumptions, the assumptions that have been ingrained in her over years of presiding over cases just like this one. The courtroom murmurs with whispers of judgment, the whispers of people who know nothing about Marcus except what they see, a young black boy standing before them. They whisper about his upbringing, his past, his skin color. But none of them stop to think about the truth of his situation. But then Marcus stands up. His hands tremble, but there's a strength in his voice, a strength born from a life of fighting for every scrap of dignity he could get. His words, though soft at first, echo through the room as he speaks clearly, looking directly at Judge Taylor. "I didn't do it, Your Honor," Marcus says, his voice steady, but full of the raw emotion of a child whose life has been defined by false assumptions. "It was my foster brother, not me. I was just there, but they won't believe me because I'm black, right?" The room goes quiet. Every head turns toward Marcus, some in shock, others in disbelief, but all of them aware that something significant has just happened. The weight of his words hangs in the air, challenging everyone in that room to reconsider their preconceived notions. Judge Taylor, her hands resting on the desk before her, looks at Marcus in stunned silence. For a moment, she seems frozen. She wasn't expecting this. She wasn't prepared to face a child so boldly confront her views. Her hand instinctively moves to her belly, where she feels the weight of her unborn child, a life she's determined to protect. The gesture is subtle, but tells a story of a woman realizing that the life she's about to bring into the world is deeply intertwined with the one standing before her. Marcus's words aren't just a defense, they're a challenge. He's calling out not only the accusations against him, but the biases that have shaped the very system that's supposed to protect him. His courage forces her to reflect on her own role in a justice system that has, time and again, failed children like him. Children who, because of their background, have never been given a fair chance. For the first time, Judge Taylor's confidence wavers. Her gaze drops from Marcus to the bench in front of her, where she's always made judgments. But now she feels as if those judgments are under a microscope. She looks at the child who has stood up against her, and for the first time she feels the weight of her own biases. Her heart pounds, the weight of Marcus's words pressing on her. His challenge isn't just personal, it's a challenge to her entire career, her entire worldview. How many children like Marcus had come before her, presumed guilty before given the chance to prove their innocence? How many had she sentenced based on assumptions, on her own biases? How many had she failed? As she stands there, looking at Marcus, Judge Taylor knows that this is a turning point. The words that Marcus has spoken have shattered something inside her. She may have the power to decide his fate, but in this moment, it is she who is being judged. The room is still, the tension palpable. Every person in that courtroom is waiting for her to respond, to make the next move. But the silence speaks volumes. Marcus has spoken the truth, and the truth cannot be ignored. Where are you watching from, and what time is it? Drop your comments below. Do you think Marcus deserves a fair chance? What would you do in his shoes? The courtroom is still, heavy with the weight of Marcus's words. His simple yet profound statement lingers in the air, forcing everyone to reconsider everything they thought they knew about him. The silence that follows is deafening, as if the world itself has stopped to take a breath. Judge Taylor, sitting high on her bench, stares down at the young boy before her. She can no longer look at him the way she once did, through the lens of her prejudices. His words have cracked open something inside her, a truth she's been avoiding for years. Her hand, once so firm in her control of the room, trembles as she adjusts her glasses. She clears her throat, attempting to regain her composure, but her voice comes out softer than it ever has before. "Marcus," she begins, her tone carefully measured but filled with a hint of regret. "I see now that I have not given you the fair treatment that you deserve. This case and the assumptions made about you were wrong. I'm sorry." The room, which had been filled with murmurs and uneasy glances, falls into complete silence. Everyone watches in disbelief as Judge Taylor, once known for her unwavering judgment, begins to unravel the layers of bias that had clouded her perspective. Her gaze never leaves Marcus's, and in that moment it's clear that something profound is happening. Judge Taylor stands up from her bench and walks down the few steps to the podium, where the defense attorney and prosecutor stand frozen, unsure of how to react. She turns to the prosecutor, her voice firm but filled with a newfound sense of accountability. "I order a new investigation into this case. The evidence will be thoroughly reviewed, and Marcus will not be sentenced based on assumptions or stereotypes," she declares. The crowd, though still in shock, feels a glimmer of hope, a recognition that the system might be capable of change after all. Turning back to Marcus, she addresses him directly, her voice softer now, filled with a compassion she has rarely shown in the courtroom. "I apologize for the way you've been treated, Marcus. No child should ever have to face what you've faced, and I'm sorry for not seeing that sooner." Marcus, though overwhelmed, doesn't respond immediately. His eyes, once filled with uncertainty and fear, now hold a quiet sense of resolve. For the first time in his life, he's being heard, not as a problem child, but as a human being with value and dignity. The courtroom is stunned. The defense attorney exchanges surprised glances with the prosecutor, both realizing that they're witnessing a rare moment of accountability in a system that often fails to acknowledge its own faults. Even the gallery, which had previously whispered in hushed tones about the case, is now watching in rapt attention. Judge Taylor turns to the gallery, addressing the courtroom with an air of authority that she had once used to issue harsh judgments. "I know I have failed you in the past, but today I will do everything I can to right that wrong. This trial, this case will be reassessed, and I will ensure that no one else is subjected to the injustice that Marcus has faced." She pauses, letting her words settle in the room before continuing. "This is not just about Marcus. This is about all the children, black children, who have been unfairly treated, unjustly accused, and denied the opportunity to prove their worth. We must change that." A hushed murmur spreads across the room. The truth that has been hiding in plain sight for years, The deep-seated racial bias in the legal system has been exposed, and for the first time there is a possibility that change could happen. Turning back to Marcus, Judge Taylor takes a breath. Marcus, you are not a criminal. You are not the stereotype they've tried to force on you. You are a child, deserving of a future that I will make sure will be bright and free from the bias that so often holds children like you back. The weight of her words lands heavily on everyone in the room, and for a brief moment there is hope. Hope that the justice system can still be redeemed. Hope that change is possible. Hope that children like Marcus will no longer be treated as criminals before they've even had the chance to speak for themselves. As Judge Taylor addresses the courtroom once more, she calls for a new trial, setting the wheels of justice in motion. The crowd watches in stunned silence, and Marcus, his head held high, stands a little taller in that moment. For the first time he feels seen. For the first time he feels heard. The room remains quiet, but the shift in energy is undeniable. Something has changed. Something has been set into motion that cannot be undone. This moment will go down in history as a turning point for Marcus, for the judge, and for the entire system. Marcus walks out of the courtroom, his steps more confident than they've ever been. The weight of the past, the unjust accusations, the mistreatment, all seem lighter now, as if a burden has been lifted from his shoulders. He had walked in that courtroom facing a system that had already judged him, a system where his skin color and his background had already painted him guilty. But now, for the first time, he steps out knowing that the system is looking at him differently. He isn't just a statistic anymore. He is a child with a future that is no longer constrained by the assumptions of others. Judge Taylor watches Marcus as he exits, her heart heavy with the realization that she had almost sentenced him to a life of injustice. But in that moment, something in her shifts. She sees the potential in Marcus that had always been there, unseen by her and the system she had perpetuated. Her eyes linger on him as he leaves, a symbol of strength, of resilience, and of the untapped promise in children like him. The court clears out, but Judge Taylor remains seated, reflecting on what just transpired. The faces of the others, her colleagues, the prosecution, the defense, are gone, but the image of Marcus standing up for himself will stay with her forever. The raw truth in his words, the way he spoke his mind and fought for his dignity, changes her. The next day, Judge Taylor publicly acknowledges her biases in a press conference, her voice steady, but filled with emotion as she admits the faults in her judgments. "I failed, Marcus," she says, "and I have failed countless other children in the system like him. It's time for change." She begins to make real changes in her courtroom, calling for a review of cases involving foster children and children of color, ensuring that they're treated fairly and given the benefit of the doubt. She implements policies to address systemic racism, pushing for a reformation of the justice system that goes beyond surface-level solutions. The policies she puts in place aim to reduce bias in the courtroom, provide better support for children in the system, and offer resources for those in foster care who are often left to fend for themselves. Meanwhile, Marcus's story spreads across the media, shared by advocates, community leaders, and activists. His courage resonates deeply with those who have been oppressed, silenced, or ignored. They see in him a hero, someone who faced a system built to fail him and found a way to succeed, not through luck, but through sheer willpower. In the days and weeks that follow, the conversation surrounding systemic racism, especially within the justice system, gains momentum. Marcus's bravery is celebrated at rallies, in school classrooms, and in discussions with policymakers. People take to social media to share his story, and many others, inspired by his courage, come forward to tell their own experiences with the justice system. As the media continues to cover the story, Marcus begins to receive messages from other children in foster care, some still living in difficult circumstances, thanking him for showing them that they, too, could make their voices heard. They see Marcus not just as a survivor of the system, but as a beacon of hope, someone who took on the powerful and showed that change is possible, even in the face of tremendous adversity. Judge Taylor, moved by the widespread support and the lasting impact of Marcus's story, vows to work alongside racial equity advocates. She meets with leaders of organizations pushing for judicial reform, seeking advice on how to implement real and lasting change. She works with activists and other legal professionals to examine how the courtroom can evolve into a space that truly offers justice for all, especially for marginalized communities. Marcus, despite everything he's been through, doesn't stop there. His victory in court has only fueled his determination to change the world. With the support of his family and a growing community of advocates, Marcus pursues a future in law and civil rights, driven by the knowledge that, just as his story changed the course of his life, he can help others change their own. He speaks at local events, meeting with politicians, and even appears on national news outlets, advocating for children in foster care and urging lawmakers to pass reforms that will help ensure that no child has to face what he did. His fight is far from over, but now it's a fight he knows he can win. The fight for justice is never easy, but Marcus, with his courage and resilience, has proven that the strength of one person can be enough to spark a movement. And he's just getting started. The work is only beginning, but Marcus's legacy of bravery and determination, alongside Judge Taylor's commitment to reform, has set in motion a revolution in how the justice system views and treats its most vulnerable. Marcus's journey didn't end when he walked out of that courtroom as a free man. In fact, it had only just begun. The courage he showed, standing up not just for himself but for all children who had been overlooked, labeled, and mistreated by the system, sparked a movement. His boldness inspired others, and Judge Taylor's willingness to change set the stage for a broader shift. Together, they demonstrated that the justice system could evolve, if it acknowledged its flaws and worked toward reform. The community, once divided on issues of racial justice, now stood united. Activists, community leaders, and ordinary citizens rallied for fair treatment and equality. They marched, they spoke, and they demanded that the system stop ignoring the needs of marginalized communities. In the wake of Marcus's courage, conversations about bias in the justice system gained momentum, and policies that once favored discrimination were being dismantled. For the first time, people believed real change could happen. Judge Taylor, now an advocate for reform, used her platform to publicly support initiatives aimed at dismantling racial prejudice within the courtroom. She worked with organizations to ensure that children like Marcus, children whose stories were so often overlooked, would be treated fairly. She spoke out at conferences, attended town hall meetings, and worked with lawmakers to ensure the next generation would not suffer under the same broken system. Marcus's life, in the aftermath of the trial, became a beacon of hope for countless others. He was no longer just a statistic. He was a symbol of what could be achieved when courage met opportunity. His story of resilience and strength in the face of a biased system inspired children and adults alike, showing that no matter the odds, justice could be won. Marcus became an advocate for change, using his voice to encourage other young people to stand up for what was right, no matter how difficult the fight. As the years went by, Marcus continued to grow, not just in age but in strength. He worked tirelessly toward his dream of becoming a lawyer, committed to using his education and platform to change the very system that had once tried to tear him down. His determination paid off, and before long he was accepted into law school, where he excelled. His story, once just that of a misunderstood child, had now become one of triumph, one that continued to inspire the world. The final scene unfolds as Marcus walks into the courthouse once again, not as a defendant, but as a law student. He walks with confidence, his head held high, knowing that he has not only overcome the obstacles in his own path, but has paved the way for others to follow. The courtroom, where his life had changed so many years ago, now serves as the backdrop to his new mission, to ensure that no child will ever again be subjected to the same injustices he once faced. His steps echo in the silent hallways of the courthouse, a physical manifestation of the journey he has taken. He looks around at the walls, at the seats where so many before him had stood in fear, and he understands that the real work has just begun. Marcus is ready to fight for the next generation, ensuring that every child, no matter their race, background, or circumstances, has the opportunity to grow up in a world where justice is about fairness, not prejudice. True justice isn't about punishment. It's about fairness and the ability to see people for who they really are, not just who you think they are. Marcus's journey may have begun in a courtroom, but it would change the future for countless children and the justice system for years to come.